What's the shot for?
What's wrong? You don't like shots?
Heavily armed soldiers occupied Shadow Moses Island. They've presented Washington with a single demand, and they say that if it isn't met, they'll launch a nuclear weapon. Since the end of the Cold War, you can get anything if you have enough money. Foxhound squad leader, Liquid Snake.
Liquid Snake? I have a twin?
I don't know the details, but it seems so.
You're the only one who can beat him.
You fool! You've killed him!
First, you're to rescue the DARPA chief, Donald Anderson, and the president of Arms Tech, Kenneth Baker.
Those are some heavy-duty hostages.
Every missile and warhead in our arsenal is equipped with a PAL, which uses a discrete detonation code.
PAL?
Permissive Action Link, the safety control system built into all nuclear weapon systems. But even so, we can't rest easy.
Why not?
Because the DARPA chief knows the detonation code.
I hear the terrorists are calling themselves the Sons of Big Boss.
The Sons of Big Boss? How could an entire unit be subverted to rebellion?
They're calling it a revolution.
Most of them were from a merc agency that I think you're familiar with.
So what exactly are they demanding?
A person's remains.
Remains?
That's right.
The man they call the greatest warrior of the 20th century.
You don't mean Big Boss.
His body was burned severely, but it was possible to restore his DNA profile from just a single strand of his hair.
You see, these next-generation special forces have been strengthened through gene therapy.
You people are amazing.
You know this information is a priceless treasure to mankind.
Priceless to the military, perhaps.
Even the existence of this genome army is a national secret of the highest order. Secondly, you're to investigate whether or not the terrorists have the ability to launch a nuclear strike. And stop them if they do. The disposal facility includes a hardened underground base. Even with our most advanced intelligence gathering equipment, we can't tell what's happening inside.
What's the insertion method?
We'll launch a one-man SDV. Launch? Same as a torpedo. Only this has no propulsion device of its own. After the SDV gets as close as it can, dispose of it. From there on, you'll have to swim.
You want me to swim in sub-zero Alaskan water? Don't worry.
That suit represents the latest advances in polythermal technology. The nuclear weapons disposal facility covers the whole island. I'll instruct you by codec after you reach your target.
Anyone going with me?
As usual, this is a one-man infiltration mission.
Weapons and equipment OSP?
Yes. This is a top-secret black op. Don't expect any official support.
The jump to 3D and the Sony brand both fostered a new environment and audience for games. Since 3D gave game developers extensive control of the camera, and since the CD format allowed for a larger degree of cutscenes, voice acting, and music, video games became a fully fledged medium of visual storytelling on par with cinema, at least in terms of its capabilities. MGS1 was an attempt to hybridize the form with film. But Metal Gear Solid's brilliance is not in mindlessly reproducing Hollywood action tropes. Last time we discussed the typical dichotomy between story and gameplay that KCE Japan's Metal Gear Solid was designed to dismantle. You'll remember the name Kojima gave to this game's innovative exclusive real-time 3D is digital fusion. And finally, that this digital fusion, along with MGS1's given genre of tactical espionage action, are both examples of what can only be accomplished with video games in the early 21st century. But to explain why a little bit further, we'll now begin a new conversation about a related feature that I'm going to now try to explain MGS1 helped first bring into existence. For convenience, we're going to call this revolutionary formal feature of the game multiple realizability. Okay, so what does it mean? MGS1 was one of the earliest big-budget so-called cinematic games to become more your own story the more you played it. Imagine a movie that could change how it's precisely told from viewer to viewer to suit a wide variety of audiences, and one that did so without impacting the overall quality of experience from one person to the next, and without the viewer ever knowing. That sounds obviously impossible. That would be 10 different movies for 10 different viewers. Because movies are like literature and TV. They're more suited, or at least more conventionally used, for more single realizability style storytelling. It's more linear, passive, and inflexible to many interpretations and their inevitable conflicting paradoxes. The instinct that we've inherited from these linear formats is the idea that there should only be one truth and only one story, only one way of telling that story. Video games are something else entirely. This is a totally optional series of briefing clips available for players from right away, from before they even begin the game itself. But while a less interesting game would have provided these excerpts in a chronologically arranged list with no gaps or discontinuities, look at what MGS1 does instead. Selecting Briefing for the first time from the main menu begins a clip labeled as File 0.
久しぶりだな、スネーク。
誰かと思えば大佐あんたか。
相変わらず不愛想な男だな、スネーク。
And it may seem like this is an ordinary cutscene here, but that timer is actually ticking away in real time, so to speak. If you cut this video short at any time, the timer will stop right there with you, which would be impossible by a simple pre-rendered cinematic alone. In a few clips, you're even given camera control, zoom, pan, and even access to multiple camera angles.
起爆コードパルは存在する。たとえ核弾頭だけでもな。
パル
Is this fully a game sequence or fully a movie? Well, neither, because it's digital fusion. It's Hideo Kojima, it's Metal Gear Solid. Okay, but as for multiple realizability, it isn't a case of that until you get to here, when you notice that the timecodes on these two separate clips actually overlap. And no, this can't be a simple accident. It's never been fixed or patched out in any of the subsequent re-releases of the game. Certain clips are going to unlock following other clips. I'd bet the scrambled sequencing of events here is actually some kind of clue, an invitation to any interested party who notices to follow the timecode lead and rearrange the briefing scenes in the proper order. You might even compare this process of decoding and rearranging randomly ordered bits of raw information to genetic expression itself. Quote, the genome seems to be a welter of various genes scattered about randomly, with no order present in their arrangement on a chromosome. The order only becomes apparent through the process of development. End quote. The timecode discrepancy in the briefing of MGS1 is far from an accident. It's the secret that we're meant to find, as signaled by the non-sequential arrangement of clips and evinced by the relative difficulty in discovering this overlap. And if we're still comparing the briefing to microbiology, well, what does this line of thinking lead us to believe? Well, what we're seeing here is actually the equivalent of a replication error, or even what's called a genetic mutation, especially since the overlap error is not actually being recognized as an error at all. We might even compare the overlap to when strand slippage occurs during the replication of DNA. As this graphic from Nature.com conveys, strand slippage starts with one correct code as a blueprint and winds up with two incorrect replicated DNA strands, one with too few nucleotides, the other with one too many. Now, assuming I'm right and the briefing is structured to intentionally resemble genetic processes like replication and mutation, well, what does that matter? Well, mutations are curious phenomena.
Thanks to constant biochemical repair work, most mutations are corrected before they have any effect. But in rare cases, mutations can accumulate, and this can give rise to diseases such as cancer.
While they can lead to cancer or even drug-resistant bacterium, quote, if DNA repair were perfect and no mutations ever accumulated, well, there would be no genetic variation, the raw material for evolution, end quote. And it's here we finally come back to multiple realizability. I submit that multiple realizability is the game design equivalent of this observation from Dr. Leslie Prey in DNA Replication and Causes of Mutation that, quote, successful organisms evolved the means to repair their DNA efficiently, but not too efficiently, leaving just enough variability for evolution to continue, end quote. Because of multiple realizability, multiple possibilities can sit side by side without contradicting. Which of the time codes is canon? Which is the truth of MGS1's events, of its narrative? Well, obviously the answer is both of them and neither. The answer changes depending on your experience, your observation, with a logic that's quite a conscious reference by Hideo Kojima to the basic principles of quantum physics. If all that's boring or weird, don't worry, the ultimate point can be made just as readily here with MGS1's very first level, the Docks of Shadow Moses.
Age hasn't slowed you down one bit.
Thanks to the VR training I did on board the Discovery.
How's that sneaking suit working out?
I'm nice and dry, but it's a little hard to move.
Bear with it. It's designed to prevent hypothermia. This is Alaska, you know.
Take it easy, I'm grateful. If it weren't for your suit and your shot, I would have turned into a popsicle out there.
An anti-freezing peptide, Snake. All of the genome soldiers in this exercise are using it.
I see. I'm relieved to hear that. Already tested, huh?
Stay alert. He'll be through here. I know it. I'm going to swat down a couple of bothersome flies.
By the way, how's the diversionary operation going?
You're not gonna believe this, but they shot down the F-16s we were using as a diversion with a Hind D. Then we got a message from Liquid. He said if we try something like that again, he'll launch the nuke.
A Hind D? Colonel, what's a Russian gunship doing here?
I have no idea, but it looks like our little diversion got their attention. Now's your best chance to slip in unnoticed.
Wow, you must be crazy to fly a Hind in this kind of weather.
Who's that?
Oh, sorry. I haven't introduced you to yet. This is Mei Ling. She was assigned to us as our visual and data processing specialist. She designed your codec, as well as your Soliton radar system. Contact her if you have any questions about either of them.
You'd probably never notice, but the first enemies in the game are actually reacting to your decisions as you infiltrate in real time. And this is just the earliest example in the game. The effect, of course, is exponential. The more you play, the more personalized and specific that your experience becomes for you.
It's Snake. I'm in front of the disposal facility.
Excellent, Snake. Age hasn't slowed you down one bit.
It's Snake. I'm in front of the disposal facility.
That took a long time. I guess you're feeling a little rusty.
Don't worry. It's been a while, but it's all coming back to me.
This may not be that big of a deal for us in 2018, but this is the point. They only seem normal today because to a large extent of this one single revolutionary game. Sure, this was a common enough practice in how games were made before 1998 in terms of the gameplay itself. From one player to the next, you didn't have to complete every level the exact same way or anything, but it was arguably Kojima and KCE Japan who first, most successfully fused the property of multiple realizability from gameplay into the foundations of storytelling itself. MGS1 had already let go of objective monoreality and was beginning to comment upon and even embody what now, 20 years later, we've come to calling post-truth. And it all goes back to the concept of digital fusion. Because multiple realizability fuses together what the camera already joined from the start, the eye of the audience and that of the director. The joys of imagination, formerly only possible for the role of the passive, relaxed viewer, combined with the autonomy and sense of self-authorship formerly only possible for those behind the camera and computer, the synthesis of the strengths of these two roles with none of their weaknesses is the end result. In short, while earlier rival titles strive to match one movie's worth of Hollywood production values, conventions, and tropes, MGS1 used multiple realizability to maximize the potential for different creative mutations. The more you play your copy and save file of MGS1, something emerges like evolutionary variation. The variety of experiences possible within the game numerically coincide with the innate variety present within human psychology, language, and culture, roughly speaking anyway. And the beauty of it all is that, again, there is no authoritative version. To the contrary, MGS1 is a celebration of the ineffable qualities within the human heart, the parts of existence that can't be reduced or converted into a single narrative or simple strings of numbers and letters. Conflict, error, mutations, it's all part of existence as evolutionarily forged figures and creatures such as us. There is no one truth here, there is no one timeline that doesn't conflict with another. Your perception will depend on the environmental circumstances that you didn't even realize you were having a hand in shaping.
Nice to meet you, Snake. It's an honor to speak to a living legend like yourself. What's wrong?
Nothing. I just didn't expect a world-class designer of military technology to be so cute.
You're very frank for a trained killer.
Looks like we both have a lot to learn about each other.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to learning about the man behind the legend.
If you want to get in, there's the front door. It's the fastest way, but there's too much risk of being spotted by the enemy.
I can't just knock on the door and ask them to let me in. There's one sentry on the left and one on the right. They're armed with 5.56ers and pineapples.
What about the air duct near the door? There should also be a duct on the second floor.
I can't see it from here.
I'll let you decide the best COA. I'm counting on you, Snake. There's no turning back now, Snake. You've got a job to do, and you're our only hope. The world is counting on you.
What can I do for you, Snake? Snake, remember what the Gauls said. The graveyards are full of indispensable men.
I've always liked reading literature from both sides. Kinda keeps me in touch. I'll share some more quotes with you if you like.
I'm looking forward to it. But to tell you the truth, I'd like to learn more about you.
Well, I'll think about it.
Snake, they're using a searchlight to sweep the area. Make sure you stay out of the beam. That base must have some kind of ventilation system to recirculate the air. There should be air ducts around there somewhere. They must need a lot of power to run the base. There's probably a diesel generator somewhere. And since generating electricity requires oxygen, there must be exhaust openings for that too. If you have any questions about weapons or equipment, you should ask our military analyst, Nastasha. Her frequency is 141.52.
This is Nastasha Romanenko. A pleasure to work with you, Solid Snake.
You're the nuclear specialist that the Colonel mentioned?
That's me. You can ask me anything about nukes that you want. I am also a military analyst, so I have an extensive knowledge of weapon systems as well. Good. You found a SOCOM. That's a Special Operations Command pistol. It's a .45 caliber pistol with plenty of stopping power. It's also equipped with a LAM for nighttime combat. If you find a SOCOM suppressor, you can equip that too. That pistol was designed specifically for use by special forces, so I think it will be useful. Some people find it a little heavy and hard to use, but it shouldn't be a problem for you. That's a chaff grenade. It's a special grenade that disperses thin, narrow metallic strips of various lengths and frequency responses. It can confuse electronic equipment. It will be useful against machines which depend upon electronic sensors. Naturally, for it to be effective, you must use it before you are attacked.
Snake, this is McDonald Miller. It's been a long time.
Master, what are you doing here?
I quit being a drill instructor, so I moved out here for some peace and quiet. I'm in retirement, just like you. Once in a while, I still help train the Alaskan Scouts.
Passing on the skills to a new generation, huh?
Campbell told me about the situation here. I thought I might be of some use.
There's no one I'd rather have in a foxhole than you.
Well, I know lots about survival in a harsh environment. I've lived in Alaska longer than you, so call me if you have any questions about the flora or fauna out here. My frequency is 141.80. Soldiers that have been forged in the fires of battle are used to catching naps whenever and wherever they can. There's a big difference between real soldiers and those kids who have only been trained in VR simulators. After playing for a long time, you should get some rest too.
I moved the DARPA chief to the cell in the first floor basement.
What about the vent shaft cleaning?
They just opened the vent covers. They're about to start spraying for rats.
First floor basement ventilation shaft. He's killed 3 people?
Yeah. Say he's using stealth, too.
Stealth? There's an intruder besides me?
Anyway, I want you to increase the security detail on the chief.
After sneaking from the helipad into the tank hangar, you take a short elevator ride to the holding cells in basement level 1. Then it's up into the air ducts to reach your first rescue target, the DARPA chief, Donald Anderson. Multiple realizability, to recap, is a story without a singular structure, or at least one that contains inside itself the potential for multiple stories. for telling the same overall sequence of events more than one way. A story with room left for the audience to each experience a different and specialized version of their own, as something of a hybrid between being a passive observer and an active agent.
Snake! What happened? Snake! Snake!
Who's that? If it hadn't been for the revolution.
Revolution?
By the time the next war comes around, they've forgotten what happened the last time.
DARPA, shaping the future, creating opportunities for new capabilities, strategically.
He fought in the Gulf War as a teenager, the youngest person in the SAS.
It had passed him by that the real had happened, even though he was really there.
Rex has fallen into the hands of terrorists.
Rex?
They are the heirs of all the murderous ideologies of the 20th century.
Dead.
You fool! You've killed him!
I'm sorry, sir.
His mental shielding was very strong. I could not dive into his mind.
Now we'll never get that detonation code.
Boss,